Hump Day, welcome into a Wednesday, February 5th edition of Daily Face Off. Live, Tyler Uremchuk and Frank Saravalli with you. The show, as always, is a presentation of Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Frank, how are you doing here on a beautiful Wednesday? 5 days until the Super Bowl.
5 days until the Super Bowl, 1 month and 2 days until the NHL trade deadline. So let's go. Mock trades. This is mock trade season. Let's have fun with this.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite things that we do. We'll only bust it out like 2 or 3 times a season, but when we do, it's always a good time. We put out the bat signal yesterday for you, the listeners, to send in your mock trades for this deadline season, and we got a handful to go through. So Pat, let's not waste any time. Flash up our first Who Says No, and it's a little one-stop shopping for the Winnipeg Jets. They get Bjorkstrand and Alexiak, both come with 1 more year on their deals. They send Seattle a first in 2025, Logan Stanley, and a 4th that could become a 2nd. I like the thought to even think out, what the conditional pick can do here. This is good research. I feel like it's not enough.
I think it's enough. Victor, the field goal's up. It's good. You have kicked it through the upright, sir. I think this is within the circle, the realm of possibility. My only question here is the Winnipeg Jets, they need a center. Is Bjorkstrand the guy? I don't think so.
Yeah, and I guess that would be my one pushback as well, is like that is great to add another scoring winger to that forward group there, but you will still have Vladislav Namestnikov centering that second line.
Yeah, and if you're giving up your first, you're losing a lot of your assets to then go out and trade for that center. So, but as a whole, the general thought process and parameters of the deal, this would be accepted on the Frank Commissioner scale.
Matt is in. Maybe he's a Jets fan. He says, "Please trade away Stanley."
Stanley, I feels like he's just been lingering there forever. Yeah. Between him and Ville Heinola, they're just there. They're
existing.
Yeah.
Pat, what's our next one we got here? Edmonton maybe solves their goaltending problems. They get pending UFA Karel Vejmelka for a 4th and a 7th. Frank, where I think this one lines up is Jake Allen with term got a 3rd last year at 50% retained.
A 3rd that could become a 2nd.
Could become a 2nd. So is it just a matter of Edmonton has to up the pick here a little bit?
Yeah, by a lot of it, I think.
Even though he's a pending UFA?
Yeah, this gets rejected, I think, because I think he means more to Utah. I also think Vejmelka is better than Jake Allen, by the way.
Fair.
But I think with Utah has some scant playoff hopes left. I know it seems far-fetched at this point, but I'm not willing to concede that 8th spot just yet, even though they're 6 points back, even though they've struggled a bit of late. I still think when they get all their pieces together and in the lineup, that team could be more dangerous. So it's going to take more than that. At this point, why even do it? You might as well keep Vejmelka for a 4th and a 7th and just have him walk at the end of the year if that's the case.
Yeah, and that's kind of exactly what our friend Turd Ferguson says, who says Utah doesn't need any more picks. It's time for them to make hockey deals. And I think that's why Vejmelka will stay put in Utah. We got one more that we kept along the lines of being kind of realistic, but it's Ryan Lindgren going to Tampa Bay, 50% retained for a 2nd and a 4th. I basically look at this as the Rangers get a 2nd for the player and a 4th for keeping half his money as well, which feels like it tracks with the value needed here for the pending UFA. What do you think of this one, Frank?
Yeah, I think it works. Bald Panarin, congratulations. This also field goal is good. This does go through the uprights in terms of a deal that would make sense. I think if the New York Rangers were to get a 2nd for Ryan Lindgren, they'd be really happy. I also think they're in obviously a playoff chase and want to be a playoff team. Probably still pretty shrewd asset management, though, for a guy that is very likely to be moving on in the summer. And from a Lightning perspective, though, my only question is, does Ryan Lindgren solve enough of your problems to warrant giving up the 2nd and 4th?
I think where he fits nicely is when you look at that blue line right now, it's Hedman, McDonough, then it's Lilberg on the 3rd pairing. And I know JJ Moser's out right now. He'd spend some time on the right side. If you get Lindgren, he's going in a 3rd pairing role. Are you maybe happy with him slotting behind Hedman and McDonough? And do you go, okay, in that role, we're going to get the best out of him?
Yeah, I think that makes some sense. I think he's a quality playoff player. I know that he's got his shortcomings in his game. Ranger fans are so tired of the turnovers and other stuff that comes with his game. And it's almost like because he's played so poorly of late that people have forgotten, just how much of a linchpin he was for that team's success in the postseason the last few years. That guy's a warrior. He's willing to do anything that it takes to win. I could see a lot of other teams being interested than just the Lightning.
Yeah. Tampa Bay also does have an extra second round pick coming up in the 2025 draft. Let's get to some wild ones here. A few that are a bit more out of left field. And I got two Seth Jones proposals for you. Both have very different value attached to them, Frank. We have one where it's Chicago gets a 5th round pick in 2054, joked Bedard for Calder. But it's basically just they get out of the deal. There's no money retained. Chicago just sends them to Dallas. The other one from an Avs fan says the Avs will give up Ross Colton, the prospect, and 2 2025 second round picks for Seth Jones at 50% retained. That's so much money to retain.
I can't see them retaining that much over that period of time. It's 5 years remaining after this deal. And not for nothing, like, I don't think Ross Colton does anything for them. Maybe the 2 second round picks are interesting, but that's a tough one. I think there has to be some middle ground between these two deals, right? Like, it can't be get absolutely nothing just to move off of the deal. I think there's probably a little bit more value than that. And it can't also be retaining 50%. What would that like middle ground? Hey, we'll retain just a hair over $2 million. What does that return look like? That's the one that I'd be most interested in. But I like the thought process, Nick. Nick's I think is somewhat on the right track here. Just too much retained.
Yeah, I think so too, actually. Like, I looked at this, and if that was 25% retained or 20% retained or whatever, I could see the Hawks this summer going, yeah, Ross Colton is a guy. We're going to slot him into our middle 6 here, and he gives us a good NHLer. Maybe, Colorado would probably like to get out of the $4 million if they have other plans this offseason and money to spend elsewhere. I think it's close. Just the money retained is, like you said, just a touch off. What's the next one we got here? I love this one. Elias Pettersson to Buffalo before that no trade clause kicks in for Dylan Cousins, Zach Benson, and a 1st round pick. That's a couple of pretty premium assets for Vancouver to get if they were to go down this road.
Is it an unprotected Buffalo 1st round pick?
That is a great question.
If that is the deal, I love this for Vancouver, and I would do this in a heartbeat. I mean, Pettersson could be something. We've seen him be something, but we've seen a calendar year plus now of him be outscored by Brock Besser now.
Yeah.
And look, I think Dylan Cousins still has a lot to prove, but what it would do is reset the Vancouver Canucks cap table. You go from 11-6 down to 7 and change. I don't know. Like, and it's the 1st round pick that's super attractive from the Vancouver perspective. That Buffalo pick is it's going to be really valuable. I don't care if it's this year or next. It's probably still going to be really valuable.
Yeah. Okay.
I would do this in a heartbeat if I was Vancouver.
I think I would too. And a lot of people in the chat kind of saying, like, yeah, no way Buffalo's doing that. Buffalo's not doing that. But if you're going to pry Pettersson out of Vancouver, you probably do need to overpay a little bit because, again, Vancouver's not in a spot like with Miller where they're forced to trade him, right?
Probably, yeah. I'd say Buffalo. Who says no? That's the name of this game. Buffalo says no.
What's the next one we got here? Jared McCann going from Seattle to New Jersey. McCann comes with some term on there. He's a guy who scored 40 goals before. He's probably the most forgotten about 40 goal scorer in the NHL. The Kraken get Dawson Mercer, a 2nd and a 4th. The contract details on McCann, by the way, 2 more years at $5 million. New Jersey would get some scoring punch, which they need. Does Seattle part with McCann for this?
I don't think so. I don't know how this helps Seattle. Because that's the big thing that I've been thinking about for weeks or months now with this Kraken team. How do they find difference makers? I'm not convinced Dawson Mercer will be one. Could be. But Jared McCann is among the closest that they have to being one. This isn't enough to make you want to jump out of your seat and do it. And I think that's one of the big questions for the Kraken in general when it comes to this deadline is, can Ron Francis be talked into something that he doesn't have to do? The have to do's are Yanni Gord, who's banged up, hernia surgery, and Brandon Tanev. The obvious, of course, must do. But what about one of the other guys that was in one of our trade proposals, Jamie Alexiak? What about, Bjorkstrand, or go through the list? Could someone pry Jared McCann out of Seattle? I think you could, but this deal specifically isn't going to be enough to get it done.
Yeah, if I'm Seattle and I'm parting with a guy whose contract is that good as well, I need either a first round pick that I can look at and go, at least that has a chance of turning into a star, or I need like a legitimate high end young player who it's like, okay, that guy is going to be a top line player for us one day. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep McCann and wait until that offer comes around. Last one, Frank, a swap of young players. Marco Rossi for Shane Pinto and a second. This would be along the lines of a stunner like middle stat for Byram last year, where it's like two young players going back and forth and we're all like, what's going on?
Who says no? The Sens. The Sens would say no. Why are you adding a premium in for Marco Rossi?
Do you think Marco Rossi is a better centerman? Like a better all-around centerman?
Maybe. The Sens say no to this, though. They really like Shane Pinto. They don't have any interest in moving him. I think the Wild are concerned about what does Marco Rossi's, we got to pay Marco Rossi next. That's the big thing. They've kind of made determinations on some players, whether it was Fiala or others, really like the player, but we're just not going to commit the dollars to do it. So we're going to move on. Not saying Marco Rossi will be traded. I just think it's a possibility. And he was very close to being on my trade targets board, but I don't think the Sens want to move Shane Pinto, and I don't think that they'd have to pay a premium on doing it to get Rossi.
Fair, yeah. And when you consider the contracts too, the fact that Pinto has one more year at 375, then he's an RFA, that does make him, I think, more valuable. So you're right there, not needing the second. We could do this all day. We'll probably do it one more time before the trade deadline, but let's go back to what happened on the ice right now. Let's start with let's go to the Shred'em. Frank, it was good to see the Buffalo Sabres finally show some fight. I know it was a staged fight right off the draw, all that stuff. But still, I like that Buffalo showed some character here.
Totally disagree with you. Too late. And, so super impressive. You drop the gloves to start the game, which everyone thought was going to happen. And then you get slapped around by Matthew Olivier. I mean, he absolutely crushed Dennis Gilbert in this fight. So you guys have a lack of response. Then you have a staged response to show everyone, hey guys, no, we're actually tough. We do care for each other. That doesn't mean anything. You showed your true colors the first time around with the way that you handled the hit on Tage Thompson. To then show up and get dusted in a fight in the first 5 seconds of the game does not impress me. You get no points. I'm sorry. No, doesn't work that way. If you came out and pummeled Matthew Olivier, maybe, not this way. You guys showed up. Wow. Awesome.
So you're saying my bar is a little bit too low for the Buffalo Sabres?
Yes, I'm saying it's insanely low. Look, the most important thing that happened for the Buffalo Sabres on Tuesday was that they won their fourth game in a row for the first time this season.
Yeah.
The problem is they're still dead last in the Eastern Conference by 4 points. Too late. Too late.
Yeah, that's kind of been the thing for Buffalo the last number of seasons, right? Like they have these things where towards the end of seasons, they'll go on runs where it'll be like, oh my God, they won 8 of 10 to close out the year. Momentum for next year. And it does never carry over.
Doesn't exist. The Columbus Blue Jackets have been famous for that. They've feasted on that. Hope is, we won games in March. No, that's because everyone stopped caring about playing you by then.
You faced a lot of backup goalies and things of that nature, so you squeaked out a few wins. Yeah, that's fair. Speaking of Columbus, they fall 3-2 in that game to the Sabres. We'll chat a little bit more about the Blue Jackets with Aaron Portzline here in a couple of minutes. But first, Frank, I wanted to turn everybody's attention to a piece that our friend Paul Paduti wrote. It's up now at dailyfaceoff.com, and it's about the drop in scoring this year. And when you look at the chart, it is interesting to see that for the first time in a handful of seasons, goals per game has dipped below 6 for the first time in 3 seasons, actually. We are at 5.96, but this gets even more puzzling when you look at some of the things Paul Paduti lays out. Power plays are converting at the highest rate in 35 years. There are more empty net goals than at any point in NHL history, and goalie save percentage is its lowest in nearly 20 years. Everything
Bizarre.
points, all the signs point towards offense should be skyrocketing, yet it's dipping.
I wish I could come up with a logical explanation for all of it. I mean, look at these graphics. Paul does such a great job of explaining it in a simple way. The fact that we're at a position where power play percentage is the best that it's been pretty much in the salary cap era, and the number of opportunities are half of what they were 20 years ago. It's bizarre. What has enabled power plays to be so good? Do have teams essentially stopped trying on the penalty kill? And then you look at these empty net goals and how high or how much that is up. I guess down this season, but it's the numbers are really fascinating to dive into, and it's almost like I think his article title, the headline of it was so perfect in like, have we reached the peak? Because everyone's looked at this era of offensive dominance and some of the brightest, stars that we've seen in the game in a long time. It's gone like this, but maybe we've reached the top and are on the way down, which raises a whole other number of concerns.
Yeah, like when I first sort of went through the bullet points of the article, there was a part of me that was like, is this like a byproduct of expansion watering things down now compared to, 10 years ago? There's now 44 more players or 40 more players, skaters that have jobs in the NHL. But then I don't know, when you look at the spike the last couple of years, like that really doesn't make sense. I do think Paul points it out, power play opportunities being as low as they are. I still think, as much as this is a buzzword that causes people to roll their eyes, Frank, I still think the league has a bit of a game management problem. And part of that is you can look at some of the teams who get the fewest power play opportunities in the NHL. And I don't think it's a coincidence. Some of the teams who are near the bottom, Vegas is second in the league in power play percentage, yet they're 31st in power play opportunities. I think there's a little bit of when a team is known for having an elite power play, refs sit there and go, I don't want that power play deciding the game.
Really?
And they don't get the calls.
I hadn't really thought about it from that perspective. I doubt that there's, frankly, that much thought process going into it. But it is interesting, like, because this team is so lethal, should I put the whistle in my pocket? Like, I don't know. I never really thought about it from a game management perspective at all. I just would assume that because the team is so good that the other team that they're playing against will be extra, charged to be disciplined that night because they don't want to give the other team opportunities.
Yeah. There's another kind of set of numbers I looked at in this. I looked at the Oilers and Leafs, two teams with star-studded power plays, and the Oilers 26th in penalties drawn. They're also 28th in penalties taken, which I think, again, lends it to the Oilers play a ton of games where there's like 2 or 3 power play opportunities. And I think part of it is refs going, I don't want Edmonton's power play deciding things. And because I'm not giving them power plays, I'm not calling anything on them. It happens for the Leafs as well. They're 25th and 18th in those two marks, both below 5th or in the back half of the league. And that I think it's an interesting thought to see, like, again, refs don't want elite power plays figuring or whatever, deciding the game. Yeah.
Hey, one thing, because we did talk about offense potentially drying up, just a developing story I think we should keep an eye on before we move on. The Colorado Avalanche have only scored 15 goals in 6 games since trading Mikko Rantanen.
That's
new normal in Colorado, or is this just a team reeling from a surprise trade? Is this deeper than that? I think a really interesting question to ask. And my God, I would love to inject some truth serum into Chris McFarland, finding out the salary cap numbers, hard numbers, just a few days after trading one of your franchise players. Would the Avs have done anything different now that they have concrete numbers in hand? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, it's interesting. All right, let's get back to the trade talk, Frank. That's what has our chat buzzing. Get to a new edition of Icebreakers brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers, where you can get a custom ring built and delivered in less than 4 weeks with the Charm Masterpiece program. It all comes with an unbeatable pricing policy. You can find out more information by visiting them online at charmdiamondcenters.com. Frank, a couple of headlines to get to from around the NHL. Let's start out in Vancouver, where there are some rumblings about Carson Soucy's availability. He's got some term, one more year at $3.4 million. What can you tell us about Carson Soucy?
Well, the Vancouver Canucks sent out a memo on Monday advising the rest of the league that Carson Soucy is available via trade. Now, that is a factual matter. He is available by trade, but important to point out that Carson Soucy has a full no trade clause for this season. He does have 1 year left on his deal at, I think, a very reasonable $3 million. But he's someone that his game has not been in order this season. He has struggled for a big chunk of this year. You see last night's game, 13 minutes played, and he's someone that when Quinn Hughes is back, is probably likely to be on the outside looking in again. Bit of a surprising twist, I think, for a guy that was such a big part of Vancouver's playoff run last year and can be a really impactful playoff piece with the size that he has. I think a team would be really wise to go out and grab Carson Soucy also because he's not a rental. He's not going to cost you anything more than any of the other rentals that are on the market. And you get the bonus year from him at, with the cap going up, I think a manageable number. Also a little bit surprising from me that Vancouver has had such a, I don't want to say knee-jerk reaction because obviously this season has been building towards it with Soucy's play. But to me, the mission in Vancouver should be to stack up the best number of bona fide NHL defensemen that they can get their hands on. And they just had really poor talent evaluation over the summer and putting their roster together. Derek Forbort and Vinny Desharnais were not it. And then you ask more of Noah Juleson, for instance, and he's really struggled. They've had Eric Brandstrom and different guys in and out of their lineup. They've been trying to find a fit. And for me, Carson Soucy is a ready-made NHL third pair defenseman. So I'd want him in the lineup and I'd want to put all of my best healthy NHL defensemen in the lineup and see what happens. But it's apparent that Vancouver doesn't necessarily see it the same way. So they let everyone know that he's available.
Can I float you this one from Miller Time? Really? A memo? Do teams seriously do that? They kind of do.
It's more an email, more a text message than anything else. I just call it a memo because I don't know which one of those it was, but they advised teams that he's available.
Frank, our deadline countdown article today is all about Casey Mittelstadt. You talked about the Avs struggling to score. Not unrealistic to think that they could be looking to shake things up once again at some point. Our friend Matt Larkin putting some potential suitors on the board for Mittelstadt, including the Bruins, the Flames, the Blue Jackets, Islanders, Flyers, and Jets. Is there one of these teams that stands out to you as one that should have more interest in Mittelstadt?
I could see the Winnipeg Jets if they weren't in division. That would make a ton of sense. I think he's an ideal 2C, high skill quotient, ability to take that game to the next level. Minnesota guy, so obviously not far from there. I could see Minnesota making sense in the same kind of vein, in search of a center. But again, in division, it's hard to do. So I think definitely a concern. On a lesser scale, like I don't think he's necessarily a fit for Boston because I don't know that he moves the needle in a significant way. But I really wonder about Calgary. They're a team obviously in search of a center, even still after adding Morgan Frost, Casey Mittelstadt on the higher end of their age scheme, but does fit what they're trying to build. And I think the key here is sign for 2 seasons beyond this one. You see here at $5.75 million. That is a very reasonable bet to make, I think, for Casey Mittelstadt. That, look, it hasn't worked in Denver. I think they've had some questions about his consistency, and they are ready to move on. Could Calgary be one of those teams that steps forward? to grab him, even though he's a lefty.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if the mantra is adding skill and youth to that forward group, check when it comes to that. And you're right on the cost certainty as well. There you go. There's a quick edition of Icebreakers brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers. Frank, let's continue along. Get to an inbox question for our friends, or sorry, get to our poll question results, I should say. We did throw the Casey Middlestat question out to the people. Frank, we gave a couple of options there, including the Bruins, the Wild, the Jets, or the always popular other option. 35% said other, and I have a funny feeling if the Flames were in there, a lot of people would have been voting the Calgary Flames as well. Let's get to one question for you, Frank. This one came in on the chat. It's another who says no, but Oilers fans were buzzing yesterday at the idea of Brad Marchand being available out of Boston. Marchand and Carlo for 2 firsts, Sam O'Reilly and Adam Henrique. I'm only throwing this up there. There's no way the Bruins do actually move on from Brad Marchand, right?
I don't see it. I mean, I guess not out of the realm of possibility, but this is essentially 3 first-round picks, though.
It is, yeah.
Because Sam O'Reilly is a recent first-round pick last year. Too much. This is way too much. I know they're going to be late picks, and I know Marchand is, an absolute firecracker to add to your team. And his production has been really good, but he's way older too.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that, Carlo is a decent fit for the Oilers, but I don't know that he's a perfect fit. Like if you're trading 3 first-round picks, like you also then he's a pending UFA in Marchand. Like, what do you do?
You got to be pretty confident you're going to keep him after that and get some sort of a sweetheart deal for him to stick around to try win a cup.
If there's going to be a sweetheart deal, it's going to be Marchand re-signing in Boston.
And that's what I was going to say too. Like if I'm Cam Neely and Don Sweeney comes into my office and says, hey, things have gone so poorly that I'm trading Brad Marchand at the deadline, I think I'm going to sit there and go, oh, then you're fired. Like if you've let it get so bad that you're trading Brad Marchand, you failed at your job.
I would agree.
Yeah. Let's move along to our daily bets for Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. All right. Frank, here's my same gamer for tonight. I think the Oilers are going to keep it rolling after getting some momentum against the Blues. And Calvin Pickard is starting in net, which I think is a nice line for the over. Give me over 6.5. Oilers on the puck line and Connor McDavid 2+ points. It all comes in at a very nice plus 320. And let's wrap up the show with a little bit of garbage time, Frank. And I'm double dipping on garbage time because there's one I really wanted to talk about and one thing that just really made me laugh. The one that made me laugh is a moment from the KHL. You know when guys will lose their skate blades and they got to hobble on one foot off the ice? Have you ever seen a guy lose both of his skate blades in a moment? It was a hilarious scene. He gets hit. They both fly off his feet and he is crawling like he has no legs to get back to the bench. Anyways, that made me laugh. I know we're having some technical difficulties today. The real one I wanted to bring up, Patrick Kane is now the all-time leader in shootout goals after popping one for Detroit last night, and it was an absolute beauty.
So good at it and has been so good at it for so long. It's kind of amazing that he didn't hold the record, to be honest. But, man, he's just got so much poise when he goes in that he can outweight you, he can shoot, he can deke, and his hands are as good as anyone. He just finds the space, finds the twine. It's a thing of beauty. It really is a work of art.
And here's the skate moment. Now that we finally got it up, I watched this 6 times last night. I think it's so funny.
But how does that happen?
I honestly don't know.
I know it happens all the time in the NHL. You get one because they're designed to pop out and be changed easily. So therefore, obviously the mechanism is there. But to have it happen with one guy twice on the same shift is crazy.
Yeah.
And by the way, we've seen some really skilled hops to the bench, but over the years, guys that actually make it look pretty artful.
Yeah, that's fair. Sometimes you get the teammate push, or a guy puts a skate blade on his teammate.
Or you get a guy just making C cuts with one blade, and he just kind of wills himself to the bench. It's awesome.
Yeah. All right. That is a wrap on today's edition of the show. Everyone that sent in your trade proposals, those were awesome. Always a lot of fun. Tomorrow, John Goins is on the show and we'll break down tonight's action from around the NHL. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of our content here at DFO, and join us right back here tomorrow at noon Eastern. Chat with you then. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content, from daily live shows with Frank Saravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.